O tuatahi me mihi ki te tangata whenua o Ngāti Awa, o te waka o Tainui. Tō koutou tipuna, te ata i rehia, e mihi ana te mukapuna a Ngāti Pāhauera, Ngāti Ruapani, Ngāti Hapanehi, mai te mata o rongo kako, te hautepua me pānia o ahuriri. Hoki wairua mai ngā hei māpuna kua titapu, ngā kura tawhiti, ngā paunamu kahurangi moemaira, he mihi hoki ki ngā kaikōrero o iwi kē, o te ao whānui, nau mai, haere mai, whakatau mai. Ko tāwhiri rangi te maunga, ko mohaka te awa, ko te kahu o te rangi te whare nui, ko rongo mai wahine te whare kai, ko tāki tumu te waka, ko Ngāti Pāhauera te hapu, ko Ngāti Kahungunu te iwi, no reira tēnā tātou katoa. My name is Migoto, as Haniko said. All of that stuff I just said before, just where I come from. Talked about the Hawke's Bay Museum. I live in Napier, born and bred in Napier. My tribe is Ngāti Kahungunu, specifically Ngāti Pāhauera Hapu, which is to the north of Hawke's Bay. I'm the curator of Taonga Māori at the Hawke's Bay Museum, have been for the past almost 2 years now, so very, very fresh to this type of mahi. We're opening in September. Apparently the 21st is nailed as our day to open. The last Taonga exhibition at the Hawke's Bay Museum stood for 22 years, so that's pretty much where I'm tilting everything up to. 22 years builds mana, 22 years things don't get put away, don't get changed over, fresh ideas don't really get to come in. So with Ukaipo, this is pretty much what I've been trying to do, is refresh the Taonga Māori exhibition without tramping on any toes. So firstly and foremost is the word Ukaipo. I'm aiming for our identity, so who we are as tangata whenua and as iwi Māori. In the last year and a half, working with Ukaipo, our other exhibitions in the institution are actually talking about home. And so I've been almost tagged with this word home constantly, where I don't feel the word home really explains what's going on in this concept of Ukaipo. So the first idea is our identity. Secondly, our papakainga, our ahi ka, so our home ground and our home fires. So with Ukaipo, I'm not saying that the Ukaipo of Hawke's Bay is the best or the biggest or the most important Ukaipo in the whole world. I'm using this as an example so that people can think about their own Ukaipo and their own iwi as well. Whakatipuranga, our upbringing. So part of Ukaipo is where we come from, our iwi, our hapu, our marae, our childhood, the home we grew up in. So it's not just a place, it's not just particular people, they're events as well, they're feelings that you have. Literal translation of the word Ukaipo is actually our mothers. The definition is the woman who has given birth to or who has reared a child being breastfed at night. So actions of Ukaipo, when we visit our homeland, we're reminded of our childhood. When we think of our tipuna and our whakapapa, this is all Ukaipo stuff. Right at the stage of the exhibition, I'm trying to think about how I'm going to do this with the visitors and the specific audience and the wider audience as well. So it's pretty much inevitable with Ukaipo that our tamariki are playing a key part. We acknowledge our Ukaipo when we identify ourselves as tangata whenua. When we speak our language, we go to our marae, land claims, and when we encourage and inspire our iwi. Something I had to kind of re-establish, I felt when I started in this role, is re-establishing what our taonga do for te iwi Māori and specifically for our hapu. Representing our tipuna are represented by our taonga, so they almost symbolise other people to us, our immediate family, that's how close they are. Descendants represent their ancestors. We're reminded of our tipuna and of ourselves when we encounter our taonga. A situation might be that this toko manoa carved posts that people come in and mihi to and come and greet, that's their tipuna and they represent their tipuna as well. Our taonga interpret our whakapapa and our taonga remain and will carry our identity into the future. So they were here before us and they will remain after we're gone. So this part here I was going to call consultation, but I didn't think the word consultation was inclusive enough to explain what I was trying to do here, so I called it Whanaungatanga, in covering these 3 points. Engaging with the local community and young people to gather stories for the exhibition, it's pretty much what my summary is. I strongly believe that this is a mahi Māori. Kōrero hea ngā kōrero. Wānanga hea te kaupapa me te iwi, mā rātou e takina te kawa. Whakarite kaupapa e whakaitia te kaupapa. So engaging with the community is a continuous process. Consult with iwi, open the lines of communication, create an open door approach. So this is something I've had to try and also do in the last year and a half, is tell the people in the community, I'm here, come and see me, get in touch with me when you want to come in and see your taonga, when you feel comfortable. I'm not going to tell you when you should come in. So that kia hoki ngā tangata I runga I te aroha me te rangi Māori, so that they come back trusting me with what I want to show them, and they feel confident in coming back as well. So consultation does not end at the research phases. Iwi need to be invited back to visit. This is also part of the consultation as an ongoing conversation of engagement. Whānau Māori. So what has inspired me to focus on the younger audience? I have found throughout this research that one cannot address the Māori audience without speaking directly to whole families, from the elderly right through to young children. Our whānau Māori rarely attend museums alone, often bring other family members as tautoko, and this is what manaakitanga and Whanaungatanga is about. So establishing and maintaining iwi relationships often depends on good personal relationships between key individuals. Empower the whole family by making it a place for the whole whānau. So in the many networks that I have now in the community, I've had to maintain those relationships. If there's a disagreement, I have to fix it straight away. If someone gets annoyed, I have to help them straight away. Some of the other stuff I'm going to show you, some of these people are teetering on, we're annoyed with the museum, have been for the past 20 years, so I have to, that very, very delicate relationships that have long before my time of coming into the museum. So with this exhibition of Ukaipo, there are 8 strands. The 2 strands I'm going to be talking about today is this one. We saw this word before, Whakatipuranga, which means upbringing, and I'm also going to be touching on this one here, te kōmautanga, which means what we do to keep our fires, our home fires, burning. Aho just means line or strand. So in the Whakatipuranga section, it's also tagged as the tamariki section, although I won't say that a lot. Learn while we are young. So I had to think about, in our collection, what does this job? How can I make it effective? How can I make a boring piece of paper awesome? So these 4 points here, we've got the William Colenso papers, quite a lot of te reo Māori stuff aimed at children. They're actually children's resources. The second one here is Hirini Melbourne Journal. So Haniko said earlier I worked for Learning Media, which helped in this respect. Hirini Melbourne's from Ngāti Kahungunu, and he wrote a lot of children's stories, 70s and 80s, then got published into journals. So we're going to be displaying those in the exhibition as well. Lots of archival photographs, and then of course a lot of our taonga in the collection. The Colenso papers at the Hawke's Bay Museum is very extensive. If you've researched a lot of Māori things before in documents, they're often in boxes that are labelled miscellaneous letters, miscellaneous books, or Māori letters, and then there's this whole stack of them from 1820 to 1920. So you don't really know what you're looking at unless you're going to spend 2 weeks going through each and every single bit of paper. This one here, Colenso actually started a lexicon or a dictionary in about 1878. He was contracted by the government to start this Māori lexicon. During this time, he was asked to finish it in 7 years on his own. And then 3.5 years went past, the government changed, they decided they didn't want to have the dictionary anymore. He says, well, I'm going to keep doing it anyway, so he kept doing it without being paid. And then 4 years, they turned to him and said, oh, can you send us a printed version of your dictionary? And he said, what do you think this is? I can't finish the whole alphabet in Māori in 3-4 years. And he only sent and printed the letter block A, and that's what we have in the collection with his own hand, and he also printed it in book form as well. This is another one of his resources that if you know anything about Colenso, he apparently had an illegitimate son to a Maori woman. I still don't believe he's the dad, but he believed he was the dad, so did his wife, so did everyone else. And at the time, those children could speak English and Māori, and they could write in English and Māori very strongly. But printed language wasn't readily available at the time. And so he was actually, I feel, quite pivotal in this point of time, print with Te Reo Māori and English. And this book is actually to teach Māori children to read printed English and Māori. This one here, Colenso's wife, his real wife, translated The Little Wanderers by Samuel Wilberforce. You might know who that is. And she also printed that in 1848. And then this one at the top there is another sort of teaches children how to use phonetics, but teaches them how to read print as well, so quite similar to this one. So this is kind of what we're dealing with here. What were the children's needs at the time? What was happening with the language? So quite a huge area to cover. Those of you who are teachers or have been teachers might recognise some of these books. Hirini Melbourne, well-known composer and writer, he wrote these 3 stories. These aren't his only 3, but these are the ones I've chosen. And the reason why I've chosen these 3 is that in the early 80s, immersion schooling, kohanga reo, and Ukaipo were just starting off, and these are the types of resources that we used in the classroom, or that I remember reading as a new entrant. So this speaks to the immersion students at the time who are now parents of children who they can say, this is what I read when I was at school. We've got a whole lot of archival photographs in the collection. We've got hundreds and hundreds of them. Most of them are unidentified subjects. And of course, most of those unidentified ones are Māori. So I spent days and days going through these photos, seeing what I could do with them, what's inviting about them, what do I like about them. This one's our favourite at the moment. So it's bringing it out of that studio type photography, and these are quite informal, specifically that one and that one, of tamariki at the time. And I had to sort of steer away from ones that were quite depressing or showed a lot of we don't have shoes or we don't have a proper house, those types of things, and create a positive sort of way of looking at these photos without it seeming a little bit scary or distant or intimidating. Right, in the collection, so these are 4 of probably about 80 objects I've got in this section. So this section, object-wise, I was actually struggling with quite a lot. I mean, if you think about Taonga objects in Taonga exhibitions, it's usually merepo namu, wood, sometimes tāne if they've got the right casing and things like that. So I had to really draw from the other parts of the collection, like social history, textiles. There were a lot of Māori content within those sections that I didn't know about, like this doll here, that have actually been sitting there for years unseen. Again, it's bringing this stuff out and putting them into their right context so people know what they are. Those 2 things there are flotation devices, so they can learn how to swim. It's a poi. This cape is about this wide, so it's a tamariki rain cape, and we've got lots and lots of those in our collection. So you might have seen some objects that are really, really old, and some that are not so old, like that doll, and something that's been important when I've been looking at the objects in the collection and thinking about the audiences that are going to come in with their tamariki, with their grandparents, is how can I make that connection so that they know what's going on in the exhibition, so that they are empowered, that they see themselves. So a section like this really does that. I'll just say something a little bit, the Daily Telegraph. The Daily Telegraph was our local newspaper up to about, gosh, I don't know, probably about 1996, 1997. And then now they've merged with Hastings and become Hawke's Bay today. And all their archives, all their photos, all their copies of newspapers are now with us at the museum. And this particular year of 1993 might have been the articles or the photographer, but there was quite a lot of Maori content. So I sort of narrowed in on that year. And growing up in Hawke's Bay, I recognise almost most of the faces in these photos. They're vibrant, they're colourful, they're positive, and they speak quite strongly to rangatahi and tamariki as well. I have to say that a lot of these things in these photos are things that don't really happen anymore in Hawke's Bay. In this area where this young girl is performing, they don't really have singing or kapahaka or anything like this on this particular street anymore. A lot of houses have been demolished. It's almost unsafe to go there after 6 o'clock type of thing. So it's almost showing what kind of things we used to do that were positive and empowered us as te iwi Māori and functioned as Ukaipo. Same with this chapel up in this corner here. No longer exists. This was the chapel of Hukarere Girls College that was on the Napier Hill. That's now no longer there. It got sold. The property was sold. The school is now in another part of Hawke's Bay. So that's Hukarere there. That's now just flat land. This is when they reopened in 1992. You might recognise that lady in the middle there. This group is actually a performing arts group in Hastings called Kahurangi, and that's in 1993. And this top right-hand photo is when total immersion schooling first started in Napier. This one's at a kapahaka performance, and this one is at a place called O Tātara Pā, that in the early 90s they had actually restored it so that people could go up there and do stuff and climb the hill and things like that. These are really, really important photos. A lot of these kids, I hope, adults now, will come in and bring their children. So sporting achievements, language, what was happening in the community that was specifically Māori and empowering for the community. Now this video is part of a group called Black Cats from the late 80s, early 90s. You can probably tell from the way that was constructed that was from the early 90s, possibly late 80s. So that video was actually aimed at rangatahi at the time to talk about this term devolution, which I didn't know what it was either. And but speaking from a rangatahi's perspective as well. And that's a video that I'll be playing in the exhibition. Locally made. She hasn't, the lady who was in the Black Cats band is Ngātai Huata. She hasn't broadcast this video before, ever. This is one of a series that she's got, and this is one that I had to sort of delicately ask her, can I please use this for the exhibition? Something else that's happening in the exhibition is we're having an interactive, and sorry I don't have any photographs because it's actually in process right now. And so these points here, virtual tour of the Taonga exhibition written specifically for 7 to 10-year-olds. There's always a better way to interpret something. There's always a better way to entertain or to, at the same time educate our tamariki when they come to these places that are often, for adults, really. So I'm hoping that this interactive will bring the visitor closer to the objects, bring the objects to life, enabling them to engage with the object and their stories. So the how of that is happening right now. And this interactive will provide access for the specific age group to understanding the wider exhibition concept in a simple and succinct way. So I'm hoping with this interactive that this age group doesn't need to be necessarily Māori children, they don't necessarily need to speak Māori, but this is something for them so they understand kind of what's going on in the Taonga exhibition. A digital solution to acknowledge the specified age group and to empower accompanying adults so that they can extend on the exhibition material, and this is exactly what Ukaipo is. So going through processes of what we were going to do for the interactive, it kept falling over because we weren't doing this. It's all very well Granddad bringing the 2 grandchildren to the exhibition, but then he has to stand out of the picture when the kids are interacting with this machine. So it's trying to find a way that includes him, so it empowers him. Oh, that's actually that carving over there. That's from this place, or that's because it's this. So the content for this exhibition, for this interactive, if remember the 8 strands beforehand, I've chosen about 1 to 2 objects from each of those strands. The designer people that we're working with kind of freaked out because that's like 16 plus objects, and oh my gosh, what are we going to do with 16? And so we're going to work with 1 or 2 objects from each strand and then see how they go. I've got specific ideas for each object as well, but yeah, I can't really say any more about that one because it's happening right now. So. Nā reira koumatua ku kōrero mō tēnei wā, and I'd really like to thank you for coming to listening to me today, and thank you for inviting me to speak, and thanks to Nonita as well for inviting me on this kaupapa. Nō reira, tēnā tātou katoa. Kia ora.
What are you planning to do to keep it fresh, to keep it, how long is this exhibit going to be here, and how are you going to kind of keep re-engaging or engaging with more younger?
With this show, because I had thought about 3 themes altogether right at the start, and Ukaipo was one of them, and I was actually wanting to do 3 of them at the same time. So Ukaipo is for 12 months, but through my short experience with this exhibition, I do think that with engaging with the younger audience is really, really important to try and go beyond the stereotypical Māori themed exhibitions for Māori audiences conventionally conceived, and to understand young people in their changing world and see where that led. Interpretation, technology date quickly. We need to be continuously creating fresh, new, unpredictable shows to ensure the young audiences are being acknowledged consistently. And I see this Taonga exhibition giving access to long-term sustainable cultural wealth, access to education. We have a commitment to the development of young as future community, regional and national level leaders and key influencers. This vision also takes into account the holistic development of whānau. I don't know whether this is museums nationally or internationally, but our local Māori community don't seem to be getting through the doors anymore. Well, that might actually be something to do with charge rates at the counter and things like that, which is the reality. So the only way they're going to come in is through their schools and things like that first. Kia ora tātou. Thank you.